Lawrence instead pulled Granby back by his arm, out of the way of Agroyth's wildly swinging fist, and letting go struck back with the same hand, clenched as it came again at his face. He did not hold back. If brawling was outrageous, it looked inevitable, and he would as soon have it over with quickly, so the blow was armed with all the strength built up from childhood on rope, lines, and harness, and Lawrence knocked Agroyth directly upon the jaw. The lieutenant lifted half an inch from the ground, his head tipping back and leading the rest of his frame. Stumbling a few steps as he came down, he pitched face front onto the floor straight through the neighbouring table, to the accompaniment of several shattering glasses and the stink of cheap rum. That might have been enough, but Agroyth's companions, though officers, and some of them older and more sober than he, showed no reluctance in flinging themselves at once into the fray thus begun. The men at the overturned table, sailors on an East India merchantman, were as quick to take offence at the disruption of their drinking, and a mingled crowd of sailors and labourers and soldiers, all better than 3/4 of the way drunk, and a great scarcity of women, as compared to what would have been found in nearly every other dockyard house of the world which Lawrence knew, was a powder keg ready for the slow match in any case. The rum had not finished sinking between the paving stones before men were rising from their chairs all around them. Another officer of the New South Wales Corps threw himself on Lawrence, a bigger man than Agroyth, sodden and heavy with liquor. Lawrence twisted himself loose and heaved him down onto the floor, shoving him as well as could be managed under the table. Tharkay was already, with a practical air, seizing the bottle of rum by the neck, and when another man lunged, this one wholly unconnected with Agroyth and by all appearances simply pleased to fight anyone at all, Tharkay clubbed him upon the temple swiftly. Granby had been seized upon by 3 men at once, 2 of them Agroyth's fellows, for spite, and one who was trying his best only to get at the jewelled sword and belt around Granby's waist. Lawrence struck the pickpocket on the wrist and, seizing him by the scruff of the collar, flung him stumbling across the courtyard. Granby exclaimed then, and turning back, Lawrence found him ducking from a knife, dirty and rust-speckled, being stabbed at his eyes. "By God, have you taken all leave of your senses?" Lawrence said, and seized upon the knife-wielder's hand with both his own, twisting the blade away, while Granby efficiently knocked down the third man and turned back to help him. The melee was spreading rapidly now, helped along by Tharkay, who was coolly throwing the toppled chairs across the room, knocking over still more of the tables and flinging glasses of rum into the faces of the custom as they rose indignantly. Lawrence and Granby and Tharkay were only 3 together, and thanks to the advance of the New South Wales officers well surrounded, leaving the irritated men no other target but those same officers, a target on which the convicts in particular seemed not loath to vent their spleen. This was not a very coherently directed fury, however, and when the officer before Lawrence had been clubbed down with a heavy stool, the choleric assailant behind him swung it with equal fervour at Lawrence himself. Lawrence slipped upon the wet floorboards, catching the stool away from his face, and went to one knee in a puddle. He shoved the man's leg out from under him and was rewarded with the full weight of man and stool landing upon his shoulder, so they went sprawling together upon the floor. Splinters drove into Lawrence's side, where his shirt had ridden up from his breeches and come wholly loose, and the big convict, swearing at him, struck him on the side of his face with a clenched fist. Lawrence tasted blood as his lip tore upon his tooth, a dizzying haze over his sight. They were rolling across the floor, and Lawrence had no very clear recollection of the next few moments. He was pounding at the other man savagely, a blow with every turn, knocking his head against the boards over and over. It was a vicious, animal struggle, insensible of both feeling and thought. He knew only distantly as he was kicked, by accident or struck against the wall or some overturned piece of furniture. The limp unconsciousness of his opponent freed him at last from the frenzy, and Lawrence with an effort opened his clenched hand and let go the man's hair, and pushed himself up from the floor, staggering. They had fetched up against the wooden counter before the kitchen. Lawrence, reaching up, clutched at the edge and pulled himself to his feet, aware more than he wished to be all at once of a deep, stabbing pain in his side, and stinging cuts in his cheek and his hands. He fumbled at his face and pulled free a long sliver of broken glass, tossing it upon the counter. The fighting had begun already to die down, oddly quick to Lawrence's instinctive sense of an action. The participants lacked the appetite of a real engagement, where there was anything of worth to be gained. Lawrence, limping across the room, made it to Granby's side. Agroyth and one of his fellow officers had clawed their way back up onto their feet, and were yet grappling weakly with him in a corner. Vicious but